Okay, let's watch this video. Bridge talks wow new direction with Ian. Let's see what this is about.
Over the years, me and you have logged heads a few times about a few things, and then today you 180'd nearly everything we thought about over the last few years. What's going on? And like, this is a dramatic shift going to like account focus, the whole thing.
Yeah.
True, I can't wait.
Honestly, I mean, it's what I laid out on the panel today. It's a mix of, we said with the technology, but we made the technology get there. It really is letting go of old stubbornness.
Yeah.
Something we've been talking about, I think, since
Nice.
midway through Shadowlands. Certainly not before Shadowlands, but midway through onwards. A mix of seeing reception to Shadowlands, a mix of also seeing how the modern player base played Classic over the course of like 2019, 2020, that made us kind of just rethink all these assumptions about how WoW should be and what was integral to WoW versus what needed to evolve, what needed to adapt to the way players were looking to game in the modern age. And so I think, for a long time, a lot of these character investment philosophies were the byproducts, were handed down from my forebears, from the people who trained me, from the original leads.
Exactly. You came into a lot of rules that were established.
Yeah. And it was like, your job as game director, Ian, is to safeguard this tradition, do it well. And so taking a step back and being like, well, no, what if the tradition's wrong now? What if the tradition was right 20 years ago but needs to change today? That can be a hard conclusion to come to, but we're certainly there now.
It
What was
shouldn't.
the first domino to fall? I'm really curious.
But it
'cause today
shouldn't,
a
though.
lot fell.
I
It's
mean,
like,
how are you gonna say that? Are you gonna say that when we're talking about 20 years of difference? Do you really think games are not gonna evolve over time? Like, come on, just look at what people play today. Battle royales, games like that.
okay, we're getting rid of not only
Games that don't
the
have any of that
we're
bullshit.
going more account focus instead of the cards focus, but we're also dropping
Ev-
like
Games that are pretty much account weight. Everything is account. You get the skins for your account. You get things for your account. You get that the highest rank is not the character, is not the role, it's your account. So I don't know. I don't
taxing
understand.
you on moving resources around. Like all these very established things are happening, and it felt like one thing fell. It's like, let's look at everything here. This no longer makes sense. This no longer makes sense, and it doesn't fit together. So was it a case of that?
Yeah, I think it was. Ultimately, it was asking the question of, are these principles actually making our players happier? Who are they serving? If we are honoring some vision, some set of values that we hold dear as developers, but it's alienating our players, who is that good for?
Yeah.
So it's not us. It's
True.
certainly not them. And so I think looking at the data, hearing the feedback from not just our community, but also ourselves, members of the team who all play alts as well, that, the focus really, I think quality time is something that is a through line through all of this. We're trying to respect players' time, but doing that is not just, about what we do in an individual character. It's about making sure that as much of the time that you choose to spend in our world feels like high value to you, and not busy work, not wasting the time, so that you can get to the stuff that you enjoy in the hours that you have left. And so it's that, the product of that set of realizations, I think probably started us seriously down this path 2.5 years ago. But then we ran into, as I mentioned, a bunch of technical challenges where it's like, okay, you could see the piecemeal movement in these directions of more things, unlocking on vendors and being mailable to alts and so forth. But the actual solution required, expansion level work to deliver.
I don't think it's something that's appreciated enough, right? Because we talked about it with the
Yeah,
backspace,
okay.
like the actual original backpack. Because like legacy reputations, like you said today, yeah, we're going there. It's going to be retroactive though. We're going to have to go backwards and backwards and backwards. And I'm sure there's some people that's like, can't you just copy the number out of one character and call it GG? But no, it's kind of a big effort, I assume, because you obviously would like to do it very quickly. But
yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, and it's not obviously the number is not the problem. It's all the other places that reference the number. All the parts of our quest system, our player condition system, vendors, et cetera, that are, where are they looking and what's the source of truth for this? There are also, in the case of account-wide reputation, there are design challenges to work through and things to come up with. We need to make sure that, we're changing our sources of reputation to also largely exist at a warband level. If now the right way to max a renown becomes, we'll just do the exact same things on 6 different characters, and because
it all
it's all
keeps
going to
adding
the
on
same
top.
bucket, well, A, now that's unbalanced, and B, that's actually like not fun either. The point shouldn't be repeat the exact same activity in multiple characters for more rewards.
I like that. This guy played Lost Ark. He played Lost
So
Ark.
again, all of that
For sure he did. He understands that before he even is in the game, the system, so they know.
needs to change as well, right? We need to rethink a lot of how we build the content to just be framed in an account level sense to look at the player behind the keyboard rather than the character that they're playing.
Oh, that's superb. I wanted to come at you with a lot of the feedback I've seen from my audience, which is a lot of people who would like, they call it the WoW Exodus and all those kind of people who are very burned with Blizzard, but do want to come back, but also of like untrustworthy and they're skeptics and all that kind of stuff. And the cadence we saw from an interview with Maria earlier is that the cadence is
I love how he said that.
looking like 1.5
Burnout
years
with
per expansion.
Blizzard.
Some like slightly slower, but it seems like a roughish.
Yeah, I mean,
it's.
I think the key points there. I think the most important thing, or like the content train has no breaks, is the goal here, right? We don't want to have any long pauses, any long lulls where there's nothing new going on in WoW ever again. And now those updates come in different.
Aren't they going for that right now with Dragonflight after this patch 10.2? There's no more raids coming out.
Different shapes and sizes.
Or
There's
is he
expansions,
talking
there's
about the
big,
new, the next
.0
expansion?
patches, then there's some of the smaller patches that we've rolled out over Dragonflight. I think we're really happy with how that mix has worked out over the last year.
It was rapid.
I think, yeah, and I think and it's going to continue, and that's what we're signing up for. That's what the future is. That's not expansion specific. That is what the whole World Soul Saga aims to deliver. I think something that I am as a point of personal pride and learnings as a developer. Like when I was I first became game director on WoW. It was during the Legion expansion, right before Legion came out. And one of the things that I will admit I personally pushed pretty hard for was a much more rapid, aggressive, robust patch plan than we had seen in any of our previous expansions. Because I thought this will be amazing for players.
I'm pretty sure that ended up happening in
if
Legion.
I may flatter myself, I think it was. But
Legion
it came at the expense
Legion did release content like every 3 months, something like that. It was crazy.
of Battle for Azeroth development. It came at the expense of just getting the next expansion done, but also
resources
polished.
are finite, right? Like
Exactly, resources are finite.
Yeah.
And so I think, and then we backed away from that for a while. We're like, oh, well, that clearly was, it's not worth sinking the next expansion.
Interesting. So because they tried to push content for Legion, BFA ended up sucking. What? I didn't know that.
But I think over both learning from experience and also growing the team and investing in the team and doing things like our acquisition of Proletariat last year to kind of continue to marshal the resources that we need.
I'm pretty sure that team is the Battle Royale team, that Battle Royale with like mages and shit like that.
To a point now where I think we can pull this off.
I don't remember the name of the studio.
The patch content that we did during Dragonflight and still be set for something as ambitious as the World Soul Saga, as War Within.
The new expansions.
And in terms of the content, the cadence within the saga itself, I think our goal is, as Chris said, faster than it has been. Certainly faster than the 2+ years where it'll take until the end of the decade to finish the story. That's not what anyone is signing up for. But beyond that, I think we're going to be guided by our community, make sure that we also give the content time to breathe, and that if we're going to a new zone, we're going to a new raid, we're not rushing you through it just to get to the next step of the story. We want to still make sure that all of it feels rich and deep, and that we're earning every step of that journey.
Okay.
One final note, just I guess I've seen questions raised on the internet and elsewhere. Like,
the skeptics are out in force at the moment.
Oh, is this like shrinkflation? Like how you get fewer chips in your bag of chips?
Yeah, you're just trying to push it out to sell an expansion 6 months quicker.
Exactly. No, these are expansions, right?
Exactly.
War Within has 4 zones and 8 dungeons and a raid and new levels, and we're not going to talk much in detail, but Midnight, I can say, we'll have 4 zones and dungeons and a raid. Like, these are expansions as you've come to know
It didn't say leveling.
And we're just going to, not have gaps. And we're going to be ambitious and purposeful as we unfold the story.
Yeah, I think it's such a big move. From what we've seen in the past where expansions have been all self-contained, one-and-done sort of scenarios, how has it been internally with seemingly now a 7-year-ish plan? that has a very clear and distinct, actually, beginning, middle, and end with War Within and then Nightmare and then Last Titan. Has that been really comfortable to work with? Like, okay, we have a beginning and we have an end, and it's not a case of sitting around a table every year and going, okay, are we going to the Dragon Isles next time? Or are we going to space?
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Partly comfortable, partly terrifying, right? I mean, certainly pulling back the, like, because we're making a commitment.
Yes.
We are, you know, there's aspects of this that now we can't change. We're going to have to work around. If we realize there's some challenges with the ideas we have, if we get feedback, if we get new ideas along the way, we're going to have to fit that to the structure that we've laid out. At the same time,
That normally happens.
You know, knowing for sure this is where we're going, this is where we're going to be, aids us in both planning for the future, but I think building richer worlds and stories today, because we can foreshadow, we can plant the little seeds for things that we know will make sense, as opposed to at times in the past, frankly,
and not make another
doing what seemed
fucking
cool at the
jailer.
moment, and then, okay, asking ourselves, well, what do we do next?
It's
and then
a novel versus
piece
YouTube shots is what it feels like. It's like, yeah, this is a really cool cutscene, but then, you know, we talked about the world not reflecting it and where's it going, but now, you know, well, it will reflect because we're already building the next world. And it's, I have two things on this. One is the technical side is, when we last spoke, we talked about the issues of, we came up with a feature, the community really liked it, but it didn't show the cracks and the crumbles until late expansion. And obviously with the development cycle that you had internally is like the next thing that was already built off that is already steamrolling. So has there been, considering you're creating a lot of evergreen content now, has there been any changes internally in the structure that allows for a much more flexible?
God damn it, bro. I was actually enjoying that.
Adaptivity to like, oh, delves, we could turn in the structure that allows for a much more flexible adaptivity to like, oh, delves, we could talk about delves. Like delves started off, people loved them, they were great, they were getting heroic gear from solo play. Towards the end of the expansion though, they really started to show some issues that people were having with them and et cetera, et cetera. But we've already built the next 12 delves.
That's absolutely a risk. I think that remains a risk in any live service world. We need to be, no matter how nimble we get, at some point we still need to.
I mean, they still have the test server when they launched it, so they should get the feedback before that, or in the alpha or beta, whatever they give up access to the players.
Plan ahead and commit and start working on something before we know for sure where, you know, the winds are blowing in the present. What we can do to insulate against that is just share our plans as transparently as possible, get things out on alpha and beta for testing as early as possible, and I think make sure we're aware of past pitfalls that have only shown up later on, and do what we can to surface them early, to, you know, really ask questions and try to focus testing on repeating the same pieces of content over and over, understanding where are the breaking points here, at what points, you know, will the shelf life of this content have you know, been exceeded, and at what point do we need to move on so that we're not caught by surprise, and we can make changes early and plan around them down the line. But it's more of an art than a science, right?
Yeah, for sure. On the delves, just quickly, are they dynamic in any way? So like the Skittering Breach, if I do Skittering Breach week 1, is it the same one the next week?
So I think the goal is for the places to feel relatively consistent. These aren't randomly generated Diablo-style maps or whatever. But in terms of the spawning there, these sorts of events that you might run into, those should vary. There will be a pool of available options that will cycle through over the course of the weeks. So again, it's like trying to think through what's this going to look like between 12 different delves, different enemies that you can encounter in each, different events that you can encounter in each. There should be enough permutations there, we hope anyway, to keep the experience feeling fresh for quite some time.
Oh, superb. That's really good. This looked to me, when Chris was explaining what the saga is, like a shift to a much more narrative-driven Warcraft than maybe we've seen in the past. There's always a narrative. Like I said, it's mostly cutscene contained, you know, then there's a break and we sort of get it piecemeal and things like that. And now you're making at least a 6-year-long narrative that's coming out. So have you had to change the team internally to get more like actual story writers in or anything like that? Or is this something you've like given to the team to play with and say, go have fun?
Yeah, I think we haven't changed the team composition for this, other than obviously Chris coming back.
Yeah,
But no, I think the narrative team that we have has really embraced this and run with it. And I think, as you alluded to earlier, it's exciting to know more about where we're going down the line. Having that information empowers everybody. It's
I mean,
something
of
that,
course,
when we were
you are
focused
preparing
so much
yourself
on
for
the
the
short term very
future.
often, could be frustrating for everyone from artists to encounter designers to quest designers, where they're like, hey, what do we know about this place? What do we know about this culture? Because it'll help me with my creative work. And often the answer would be, well, we're still figuring that out. We don't exactly know yet. Come back a bit later. But they have to start
It's crazy
doing
how they did that for 18 years, man. Fuck.
something.
Yeah.
Whereas now, we know exactly where we're going to be adventuring in 2 years. Let's think about who the prominent characters are going to be at that point in
Are
time.
we going to see some new faces? Obviously, the cutscenes aren't in thrall. Terran did, that team did, I'm sure when you saw that, you were like, okay.
Yeah, our creative cinematics team are
Yeah, I was talking to Terran before. He was like, I was crying every time I was making it. I was like, oh my God, it's so good. But now you've got this opportunity where it's not feeling rushed, is what I'm hoping for. This is my personal hope. Is like, I love video game stories because you can play through them, you feel connected. Are we going to see, feels weird, I'm asking story-driven questions to you, when it's always mechanics focused, but are we going to see some new faces come in?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I'd set the...
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think we can.
Okay. What
do
about
that
old
more
faces?
purposefully. It's a mix of obviously familiar faces, Thrall, Anduin, Jaina, etc. Also taking some existing characters that have not necessarily been in the spotlight and recognizing they're going to have important parts to play in what is to come.
Bane, for
right?
example.
Valeria, certainly, Tyralion, with his history with the light, is going to be a factor in any coming war between the light and the void. There are others who have their stories. How do we begin to reintroduce them to players? Knowing if we know someone is going to be central to 12 at this point, to midnight, how can we make sure that when that arrives, everyone knows who they are and they're not being introduced for the very first time?
Okay.
And also, we can think about characters we want to have central roles in 12 or 13 who are being introduced for the very first time, who are going to meet for the very first time in our journeys in the War Within, and not have that just be happenstance, but much more purposeful than ever before.
That excites me more than anything, genuinely. Like, I know we always focus on mechanics and stuff, but God, I wish I could care about some of these characters. That's such a big part of the gaming is like, I want to care if this person turns up. I want to care if that person goes. This is a skeptic question.
This Final Fantasy
is this the first time you've
player is coming out?
Pre-order, you can play a little bit earlier.
Ooh.
How did we get to that decision? Because obviously, people hate feeling like they're behind.
Understood. So I think we want to be very mindful. I mean, we're looking at what Diablo has done, what other games have done. At the end of the day, we're also trying to offer the maximum value in the package and the pre-purchase, but also just in the base expansion package. Price is unchanged. The base level package now includes a boost, so I think it's a better value across the board than Dragonflight was. With early access, we're definitely sensitive to any fairness issues or perceptions there. But I think the key here is that, as everyone who certainly European players know, until that first weekly reset, Mythic Zero is not available. Anything weekly is not available. Wrapper quests, profession cooldowns. We're going to make sure, also look at things like rare drop tables. The point here is just a little bit of a head start on leveling. Maybe, if you feel like you don't have as much spare time to get to max level, so that when your friends start running Mythic Zeros, who were able to take time off for the expansion, you're behind them. Let everybody kind of get a little head start there. But the actual, even pre-end game stuff is going to be inaccessible until the first weekly reset, which will be after the full global launch has occurred. And really, the intent is that by 2 weeks in, certainly by the time the season starts, there should be no perceptible difference, no advantage between someone who had the early access versus someone who didn't.
Yeah, so
I mean, there's always going to be something, like, for example, in 3 days, someone could level up, I don't know, 5 different characters playing all day in those 3 days. But
see, like we saw with Dragonflight, rare mobs. The rares that are popping up were such an enormous part of the game.
That's something we've been talking about.
Yeah.
I think in the fine print on the pre-order page, it focuses on Mythic Dungeon, weeklies. Rares are an obvious one, right? It's like, I think I would say right now, all the high-end epics and those loot tables should be conditioned not to drop until the first reset.
Super. So I think that's the message to get out.
And that's the sort of, philosophically, that's the sort of stuff we're aiming at here. This is really just about getting a head start on leveling, not a head start on the competitive aspects of gearing in the end game.
Okay. I guess my last question, because they give me the signal. Chris's phrase, and I assume he talks about this too, was "It's time to come home," which I mean, obviously from my perspective, was like reaching out to me and the people who stepped away for a while. Although I still play a lot, but certainly my audience does not. Is that something we thought about in Tilly? Because like Dragonflight was like the transition period. You moved to the more seasonal play, and I'm interested to see. In fact, I'm going to use this as my last question. You moved to seasonal play more in Dragonflight, and that is now quite openly what you discuss. How has the reception been internally to like this freedom and relaxation that we talked about last time? Of like, people are going to drift away for a little bit towards the end of the patch cycle. That's okay because it doesn't mean we need to come up with a billion chores for them to do to make them play every year.
There have been so many amazing games released this year. Right, we've been doing our players a disservice.
I mean, probably
we tried to say no.
This year has been probably one of the best years in gaming. And I'm not even joking.
You have to play WoW all the time, or you're going to fall behind, and it's not going to be relevant, and therefore you have to ignore all these other amazing things that are happening in the industry or elsewhere. I think we want to understand and build a healthy, long-term relationship with our players that is, like you said, about respect.
Yes.
And hopefully, a lot of what we've been doing is trying to re-earn trust, knowing that it needs to be re-earned. Dragonflight was, I think, a breath of fresh air in a lot of ways. But when we say it's time to come home, there's a new beginning, right? And it's a chance to get in on the ground floor of something that's going to be an amazing journey that starts here.
Okay, well, I'm coming home, so that's okay.
Love to hear.
All right, let's wrap it there.
Okay. Oh, great. That was great. Great conversation, for sure. I love the 180 the Comida Hasane, and it was not good for a few years, but he's been restoring my faith in the team since 9.2. I mean, I'm definitely excited for the new expansion, but we will see. There's still a whole year for that, so I don't know. I'm gonna play it, that's for sure. So I just hope it's good.